But I am absolutely passionate about helping people bring the people side of the business to our industry. What great graphic we have here. People have asked me already, how long have I been with Luckett Farley? I've actually had a long relationship with Luckett Farley. Ed Jordanek, our president and CEO, hired me as a consultant prior to his role as president and CEO. So he took the reins in 2005. I still have notes from my conversation with him in 2006. So I was working as a contractor with him, putting some things in motion, supporting him along with some other clients. And really what we are now bearing is the fruit of all of that work that happened between 2005 and 2015. In 2015, I stepped out of a global role with Yum, where I was traveling internationally, quite a bit actually, and doing talent development and organization development for Yum. So you all know who Yum is? Okay, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, KFC, on a global stage. So all of this stuff that we're talking about does not relate specifically to architects, construction managers, engineers, interior designers, and it doesn't just relate to the United States. These are global issues on a huge scale, and what was so exciting as I stepped out of the role in Yum is to be able to come back home to Luckett Farley and to be able to take the reins of the entire people agenda for an architect, engineering, and interior design firm. I don't know if any of you, well, you all know about this in this industry, but how many people have someone sitting in the C-suite talking about the people agenda in your firms? And how many of you believe that the people strategy is equal importance to the business strategy? And I think it sends a really powerful message about what Luckett Farley is doing, that we actually concentrate as much on the people strategy that will help drive the business strategy. All right, and I do want to say thank you to the former presenters. Just so you know, Brent, thank you so much for talking about purpose, autonomy, and mastery. We're going to talk about that here. Great minds, right? And also how we make lives better. We talk about that at Luckett Farley, and we know that the workforce of the future, and notice I didn't say millennials. I won't use millennials, it's the workforce of the future. From now on, the workforce of the future sees work as a means to their lives, not living for work. All right, and we're going to see that. I'm going to share some stories with you globally and what's going on at Luckett Farley right now. Tom, he's not here anymore, but I do want to thank him for talking about how change is inevitable. We know that. We're a 163-year-old A&E firm. We believe we are the oldest, I'm looking at my marketing person, we're tied in the United States. I say we're the oldest, who can prove us wrong? And we know that change is not only inevitable, but it is constant. And so in order to get ahead of that, you need to be strategically thinking about change, not reacting to it. Tom also talked about fads versus trends. That's another big issue for us. There are a lot of fads in talent development. There's a lot of fads in HR. The question is, what are the trends and what can we strategically be doing about them now so that we're well prepared for them in the future? And then David, thank you so much for talking about talent acquisition as it relates to marketing, because this is a drumbeat that we talk about a lot at Luckett Farley. And that we are always out, we are always marketing ourselves, but marketing is not only the marketing department's job, right? And talent acquisition isn't only HR's job. We have department managers who think that talent acquisition is really like just placing an order. Susan, I need 3 civil, 2 electrical, and 1 structural. Can you have that done by Friday? We all know that that is not the way this happens, right? Instead, what we are really working with our department managers and our market directors is understanding that we have to be representing Luckett Farley all the time, building relationships so that we always have a pipeline of talent that wants to come and work for us. Now, that means we have to be patient, right? Passive candidates take longer. The first time you call them, they're not going to want to move. But if you build that relationship over time. So, thank you, David, for planting that seed, because we're going to get there as well. So if some of you are thinking, man, we keep hearing the same thing over and over, I would say you just heard a trend. right? That's not a fad. That's a trend. You should probably be paying attention to it. All right, so we're going to talk about how our employee owners, and we use that phrase intentionally. We are a 100% ESOP owned. Our employee owners own 100% of our firm. And so we don't call them employees, we call them employee owners. And they are absolutely the roots of our success. So when I talked to Holly, I don't know when. Actually, I think I talked to you before I even actually came on board at Luckett Farley. Yeah, it was top secret because I had to step out of something and then actually could announce I was there with Luckett Farley. So this conversation's been going on a long time, but really what we're going to talk about today is how we use what we call our employer of choice continuum as our strategic true north. It does define for us what we focus on and what we don't focus on. We will also talk about how at Luckett Farley now we are really focused on not only our client value proposition, that light is bad, there we go, our client value proposition, which as marketing people, you guys get it, right? You've got to have a client value proposition. On the other side of this HR piece, we've got to have an employee value proposition. Right? And so where do we make that balance, right? And at the same time, think about this, 163-year-old firm, okay? So how do we go from good to great? How do we preserve the core, right? Because we're doing something right, and stimulate change. Because we know that what got us here will not get us there. We know that. And Ed was really a forerunning thinker in this back in 2005, and I'm going to be able to tell you some of that story about Luckett Farley and how now where we are in 2015. All right, so how we got here. Like I said, I've known this firm for a long, long time, and what we were trying to do was to turn potential energy that existed in the walls of our building into what we would call kinetic energy, right? And dare I try to define kinetic energy in front of a group of engineers, but the whole idea is to take this potential energy and get it moving, right? And use it as a wave that we could help to drive the strategy of our firm. We didn't see people as just some other resources we needed to align. It was how do we turn the potential that's already in our walls into kinetic energy. So we knew we had a deep bench of talent at Luckett Farley. We knew that we had strong regional brand recognition. We knew we had a loyal workforce. All right, those are all really good things. We also had technically proficient with a great reputation, and we certainly have a valuable portfolio of marquee clients. How many of you have ever heard of Churchill Downs? Okay, so we've got a lot of that cachet with a lot of our marquee clients. So the question becomes, but in 2005, oh, that was fast. In 2000, now that's not a picture from 2005. but much of the cultural norms and the way we did business was very similar to this. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This is a real picture from Luckett Farley. All right, so yeah, this is, but not 2005. It was like the 1800s or something, right? Yeah, okay. But this was, imagine this was the work. When Ed took over the presidency in 2005, it was the first time in firm history that our architects and engineers were allowed to have desk phones at their desks. 2005. Okay? At that time, every architect and engineer was expected to wear a tie and a white shirt to work every day. You did not take it off. It was required. About 3 years in, we made the momentous decision that maybe ties in the office weren't necessarily that important. Maybe when you're facing a client, we get it. So we had a tie cutting ceremony. And they literally cut Ed's tie off. And then we had this whole big, ceremony around what you could and could not wear. We didn't want sweatpants and all that. At the same time, the COO continued to wear his tie for an additional 3 years. You want to talk about forces for change and forces for status quo, right? So if we're going to go from good to great, we know we need to preserve the core, but we also need to stimulate some change. So this is what we were talking about with Ed in 2008, 2009, when my consulting group, started our own internal Luckett Farley Leadership Institute. Okay, so that's when we were talking about training and development and learning. Luckett Farley does invest a whole lot of money in terms of time and resources in developing our future leaders. But what we know is that these are the things that are out, right, in the workforce of the future. And this was 2008, so we're 8 years ahead of that, okay? But this is what we knew we were going to have to be moving toward, was these types of things. So cognitive, social, interactive, competence emphasized. So when you start talking about how do you develop architects and engineers, how do you focus on emotional intelligence? Listen, emotional intelligence is the one thing that you can change. You can't change your IQ. But if you put development in front of people and get them focused on the importance of developing it, and they see the outcome, you can change your EQ. And so we know it's worthy of investment over time. So we started focusing on some of these things all at the time where the workforce of the future started with the millennials, right? But now it's beyond that, knowing that the workforce of the future, they are free agents. The idea that they are going to stay with you and stay forever, that is long gone, and that is global. That's not United States only. All right, by the time some of our millennials are 33 years old, they will have had 9 jobs. That's the reality. All right? So it's a big difference. We know there's generational differences in the work that we do. We've got boomers, we've got Gen X, we've got Gen Y, we've got millennials, right? And we've all got different expectations. So when we are talking, this is not specific to Luckett Farley, but when we are talking about the workforce of the future, we know that there are some things that we need to do as an organization in order to attract and retain the best talent. All right, these are the workplace trends you cannot afford to ignore. All right, again, 2011-ish, we started talking about this. We put some things in place. But the number one thing that we need to start talking about is leadership. Y'all know this picture, right? Right, Devil Wears Prada. We all know that kind of manager, right? That dictatorial manager, as opposed to, right, the bringing people along leader, enabler, focused on purpose, autonomy, and mastery. All right, so those bottom line, at any cost people are costing you way too much. All right, and if you keep them, they're still costing you. Why? Because they are chasing people out the door. When you start doing the cost of not only losing someone, but the net service revenue that's lost when you're trying to find someone else, plus the cost of replacing them, getting them up to speed, it's just too high of a cost. All right, number 2 is a focus on sustainability, and we all know the Tom's story. It's just a good picture to talk about here. But what we know is that organizations that care about the bottom line, but not only the bottom line, are the ones that are going to be able to win the war on talent. All right, so it's focusing on, yes, we are in a profit-oriented business that allows us to sustain. At the same time, we need to focus on doing purposeful work. And I would argue that for our architects, our engineers, our industrial designer, our interior designers, that purposeful work is even more important than in some other fields. Right? Those are people who went into a profession because they want to make a difference in the world. And they do that by bringing their engineering skills. They do that by bringing their design skills. So even more important, we also know that technology is changing not only the way we work, but the way that we learn, the way that we develop, and of course the way that we attract and retain our talent. Most people now, when they are looking for jobs, they do not always have a resume, but they certainly have a LinkedIn profile, right? And so you've got to meet them where they are, and you have to have a presence where they are. And it's not just about the client value proposition, it's about the employment value proposition. Here's what you get, right? Here's where we can help you. We also know, and this, of course, I've made my career in this, so of course I'm very passionate about it, but it's all about growth and development. And you could call it learning, right? I was in an organizational learning function for YUM, but really learning and development are the same things, right? And what we know is that if people don't feel like they are growing in a role, they will leave and go somewhere else where they can do that. Now, for many of us, we grew up with this idea of a corporate ladder, right? 1 rung, 2 rungs, 3 rungs, all of a sudden you're kind of there. What we know is that, especially in most of our firms of the size that they are, those ladders are very short, and they get frustrating to people who want to move up. So what we got to get good at talking about is a rock wall, right? You're going to move over a little bit over there and try something new over there, and then you're going to move a little bit over there, and eventually you're going to go up. But your development, your career path is really going to look like a rock wall. Now, they have to understand it, right? And it has to be part of what we pitch to them, because we're pitching at the recruitment and the sourcing phase against people who've already got very rote plans for your career development, right? The GEs of the world. All right, I love this picture. We need to cultivate the culture of an organization. We talk a lot about what a culture is, but again, we gotta be really careful not to put lipstick on a pig, right? We gotta be really honest about what our culture is in an organization. Do what we can to manage it, because again, if we don't manage our culture will manage us. It just happens, right? In fact, predominantly my consulting career was all about helping organizations build intentional cultures, right? That would help provide this wave to get work done. All right, so cultivate the culture. Communication is another big trend. We know people have a lot of access to a lot of things. We know some of our employee owners find out things before we find them out. And we got to get really good about constantly being transparent about that. So again, the idea is if you think you shouldn't share it, you probably should. Always err on the side of too much. And those of you who are in leadership positions, I know you get tired of saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Say it again, because they weren't listening before, but they might be listening now. So we got to get really good at that. All right, and finally, rewards. What we view as rewards previously, in previous generations, in previous industries, were things like money, corner offices, those kinds of things. What we know now is that meaning is the new money. Ironically, I'm going to tell you this, we have had 2 of our younger, one's an architect, one's an engineer, just this year, when offered a raise because of the great work that they were doing. It was above average raise. We want to slide them some money right here. Look, thank you for your great work. They slid it back. They slid it back and asked if they could have more vacation time instead. All right, that's a trend. That's not a fad. So you got to think about it, because the way we've done this in the past is a whole different mental model. All right, so that's where we were, right? And we knew this business case. We knew we needed to change some things. And we knew that we needed rock stars, all right? And that's what Ed would call them. And what we knew was that companies that excel in the future will be those that prioritize people skills as the critical path for competency in their leaders. We can build technical skills all day long. It is the rare, valuable talent who's got the combination of both. And like I said, because we know we can develop emotional intelligence, we know, research proves it, that you can help someone become more emotionally intelligent. That emotional intelligence builds relationships. What do relationships give us in this industry? Work. I mean, that's what it is. It's all about that. So if we know we can build it, we got to focus on it. It was not just a really nice, warm, fuzzy choice. There was a very selfish business reason in this, right? We want to give people business skills. We want to give people skills, because we know it inevitably ends up with more business. So back in 2005, Ed came up with something that is now our mantra. And it's what we call the employer of choice continuum. And for many of you, because you sit in marketing and business development, you're going to kind of look at it and think, I think that might be upside down, Susan, because the client's down toward the bottom. Right? Aren't we supposed to be focused on the client? But what we thought was, if we can attract and retain the best talent in a professional services firm, they will attract the best clients, right? Because the best clients want to work with the best talent. They want to work with those thought leaders, all right? So we turned it on its head. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of this employer of choice continuum. And it's important because it relates to engagement, all right? And we've all read the studies. You can talk about the cost of it, but I want to share just a few high-level numbers with you. Engagement gives companies an edge. Those companies that have higher engagement statistics, scores, okay, are 27% more profitable on average. That means you could be even more profitable, right, because that's an average. They are 33% more productive. They have 50% higher client satisfaction, one more, and they have a 50% higher rate of employee retention. Now, how many of you don't want that every day, all day long, right? So strategically, what are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on how do we get the engagement. Now, on the other side of the engagement statistic is this. Disengaged employees, on average in this country, cost industry $300 to $350 billion a year. Okay? That's a big number. Now, when we talk about disengaged employees, it's important to understand the difference, right? We've got highly engaged, and then we have disengaged. In the middle, we have compliant. Okay, I'll do it because you said so. I do it because I got to have a paycheck. I do it because I don't know what else I could do with my life. Okay, I'll do it. That's compliance. Compliance counts as disengagement. We don't want compliance. We want beyond that, all right? So it costs us a lot of money. All right, now here's the big win for us at Luckett Farley. Remember I started talking about how we knew what got us here wasn't going to get us there? So we are preparing for change at all times. Companies who have higher engagement scores have employees who are more supportive of organizational change and resilient in the face of change. So we know change is inevitable, right? We know that growth is intentional. So what do we want? We want people who are ready to adapt to change, because we're a 163-year-old firm running down the tracks. We're not going anywhere, right? But if we keep only focusing on preserving the core, what's going to happen? Right? And if all we do is change, what's going to happen? Right? So we got to think about that balance. But what we need is resources, human resources, employee owners who are highly engaged, because then they support the change and they are resilient in the face of it, because it's coming whether we want it to or not. All right, so here is where we talk about the employer of choice continuum. We talk about this with every candidate. It is something we weave into all of our leadership messages. It is baked into the DNA of how we approach our work. It starts with our belief that if we can provide the best culture, environment, and reward structure, that will enable us to attract top talent. If we can attract the best talent, we will win the best projects with the best clients. Those best clients will pay, probably bet more on time, right? They will pay more. They will not nickel and dime us to death, right? There's all of that. And that, what? Gives us the greatest earnings, which enables us, this is why it's a continuum, that enables us to push that back in, plow it back in to the best culture, environment, and reward structure, right? We don't just scrape it off the table. All right, thank you. All right, so becoming an employer of choice. Why bother? We know we need to nurture and engage workforce. We know we need to increase quality and client service. We know it has reduced our errors and omissions. We know it has mitigated our turnover costs, and we know it has increased our profitability. We have the numbers. Additionally, we have been a best place to work since 2009. We have increased our number of strategic hires. We have increased our engagement scores because we've been intentional about it, and we share them with the firm. How many of you would share your engagement scores with the entire firm? Think about that. And we know that it results in increased talent and retention. All right, so we've been a best place to work. Here's our awards. This is the side of our building, by the way. It's all these quotes from our employee owners telling other people on the street what a great place we are to work. That's one of them. But what I want to get to is our belief that we have to focus on our employee value proposition as much as we focus on our client value proposition. All right, and so we get really good about talking about what you're going to get, and I don't mean money and bonuses and parking space. We're going to talk about intentional career conversations, not just performance conversations. Those happen mid-year. All right. So if we want to improve our client experience, our loyalty, and our need to focus on our employee experience. All right, I just want to quickly, just 2 minutes? All right, because this is what this is all about. I told you I was going to tell you a story. This is the story, this is the end, and this is what happened. So we know, okay, those numbers I gave you before, those are industry, that's national kind of numbers. We did a survey and we were asking people, what is it that you want out of your work? And then we start baking that into the way we work. So for instance, we know our people want professional growth and development. So what do? We sponsor the LFLI, right? The Luckett Farley Leadership Institute. We know that they want a collaborative and flexible work environment. And there's some pictures of it there. And then we also know that they want, and it's stronger and stronger every year, they want purposeful work. They want to do work that matters to them, that changes their communities, and enables us to sustain for another 163 years. And they want to be involved in their community. Part of our LFLI is a service project, and so they have to get together as a team. They do something that gives back to the community. And finally, of course, wealth creation. And we talk about wealth creation. It is not just about the instant gratification of more money. It is as part of an ESOP program, you are creating wealth for your family over time. Our employee owners are awarded shares of stock every year. All right, they are owners. And I'm going to end with this because I told this story to Holly, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. I was really surprised at this ESOP thing and how the great results we were getting from it. And when I went into one of the restrooms, one of the first weeks I was there at Luckett Farley full time, there's a bathroom stall, and when you close the door, there's a handwritten piece of paper there, and it says, "If you use this restroom, please make sure and jiggle the handle before you leave, or you are flushing your retirement down the toilet." And if you want to talk about an ownership mentality of, look, we're all paying the water bill here, so could you just jiggle the handle? You know, that really runs deep in what we do. All right, so I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm sorry I've gone over time. Anything? Yes?
Engagement score, what is it? How do you get it?
Oh, well, okay. Oh, that's a great question. So you can do employee attitude surveys, EASs. You can go to any, like we do Best Places to Work in Kentucky, but you can find them online and send them out, and they ask things about, you know, my supervisor cares about me, I work in a safe and warm environment, all of that. Now, I will tell you this. We are choosing to use one number, and we're going to benchmark it this year, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And this comes from our Yum days because we know that this works. It is the recommend a friend number. So if any of you are doing engagement surveys, pay very close attention to that recommend a friend. And that's the question that says, would you recommend a friend to work at Luckett Farley? All right? So that number is a direct reflection on engagement. And if you can move that number and figure out what it's going to take to get your people to invite their friends, then you're golden. Yeah. Yeah, not my employee owners. My employee owners hold my feet to the fire, believe you me. My employee owners have very high expectations because we are very transparent about what we're doing, yeah.